Imagine an empire so vast it spanned from the sands of Egypt to the banks of the Indus River. A civilization that set the foundation for much of the modern world we know today. From the rise of Cyrus the Great to the fall of Persepolis at the hands of Alexander the Great, the Persian Empire was not just an empire, it was a force that shaped history. Welcome to the incredible story of one of the most influential civilizations ever to exist. Today, we dive deep into the entire history of the Persian Empire. This is the story of power, ambition, culture, and legacy. Let's explore how Persia rose, ruled, and ultimately fell, leaving a mark that echoes through time. The rise of the Persian Empire. The history of the Persian Empire is one of the most fascinating stories in the annals of human civilization. It all began in the ancient land of Persia, a region corresponding to modern-day Iran, where the first seeds of an empire that would stretch from the Mediterranean Sea to the Indian subcontinent were planted. The rise of the Persian Empire is a tale of ambition, warfare, and visionary leadership. But before we delve into the grand narratives of kings like Cyrus the Great and Darius, we must understand the origins of the people who would go on to dominate much of the known world for centuries. Early civilizations and pre-Persian Persia. To understand the foundations of the Persian Empire, we must first look at the people who inhabited the region long before the empire's formation. The earliest known civilizations in Persia emerged around 3000 BCE with the rise of the Elamites in the southwestern region, near modern-day Kazakhstan. The Elamites were skilled in metallurgy, arts, and writing and played a crucial role in shaping the region's cultural identity. Their city-states, such as Susa, were pivotal in trade and culture, laying the groundwork for future Persian dominance. At the same time, other ancient peoples were also populating the Iranian plateau. Nomadic tribes such as the Medes and various Indo-European peoples began to migrate into the region. These tribes would play a pivotal role in the establishment of the Persian Empire. The Medes, in particular, established a kingdom that stretched across much of modern-day Iran with their capital at Ecbatana, present-day Hamadan. For centuries, the Medes were one of the dominant forces in the region, but it would be the Persians who would eventually outshine them. The rise of the Persian kingdom. The origins of the Persian people trace back to the ancient Indo-Iranian tribes who arrived on the Iranian plateau around 1500 BCE. These tribes spoke an early form of the Persian language, which would eventually become the official language of the empire. Among these early Persian tribes was the Achaemenid family, whose name would become synonymous with imperial power in the centuries to come. The Persian kingdom began to emerge as a distinct political entity in the 6th century BCE with the ascension of Cyrus the Great. Before he was crowned the ruler of Persia, the region was still dominated by the Medes. The Medes, however, were not a united empire, and their political structure was more fragmented. The Persian kingdom, located to the south of the Medes, had been under the control of various chieftains and petty kings. Yet, it was Cyrus who would change everything. Cyrus II, also known as Cyrus the Great, was born around 600 BCE. He was a member of the Achaemenid dynasty, and his rise to power was not a sudden event but the result of years of careful political maneuvering. At the time of his birth, the Medes were the dominant force in Persia. However, by the time Cyrus reached adulthood, the Medes had become politically fragmented. Their king, Astyages, ruled a kingdom that stretched from the Iranian plateau into Mesopotamia. Yet, his rule was unpopular, and the seeds of rebellion had already been sown. The fall of the Median Empire. In the early 6th century BCE, Cyrus's father, Cambyses I, ruled the Persian kingdom. Cambyses was not a particularly powerful ruler, but his son, Cyrus, was different. In 550 BCE, Cyrus, having consolidated his power in the Persian kingdom, led a revolt against the Median king, Astyages. The reasons behind the rebellion are not entirely clear, but it appears that Cyrus had the support of many of the Median nobles who were unhappy with Astyages' rule. Additionally, the Persian kingdom was a growing power, and many saw the opportunity to break free from Median dominance. Cyrus's revolt was successful, and he managed to overthrow Astyages, capturing the Median capital of Ecbatana. This marked the beginning of the Achaemenid Empire. By defeating the Medes, Cyrus not only gained control over their territory but also secured the backing of a significant portion of the Median population. With his victory, Cyrus laid the foundation for the Persian Empire that would soon stretch from the Indus River to the shores of the Aegean Sea. After the fall of the Medes, Cyrus's next target was the Lydian kingdom to the west. Lydia, ruled by King Croesus, was one of the wealthiest and most powerful kingdoms in the ancient world. Croesus, however, made a critical error in judgment when he decided to confront Cyrus. After a brief campaign, Cyrus defeated Croesus in 546 BCE and annexed Lydia into the expanding Persian Empire. The fall of Lydia was a pivotal moment in the history of Persia, as it marked the first of many conquests that would expand the empire's territory into Anatolia and beyond. The conquest of Babylon. Following his victory over Lydia, Cyrus turned his attention to the great city of Babylon. Babylon was one of the most influential and prosperous cities in the ancient world, home to the famous Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. At the time, Babylon was ruled by King Nabonidus, who was unpopular among his subjects due to his religious practices and distant rule. Babylon had long been a rival to the Medes and Persians, and the Persian king saw an opportunity to expand his territory further. In 539 BCE, Cyrus led his army into Babylon, defeating Nabonidus without much resistance. The conquest of Babylon was a turning point in world history, as it brought much of Mesopotamia under Persian control. Upon entering the city, Cyrus was hailed as a liberator, as he allowed the exiled Jews, who had been captive in Babylon for decades, to return to their homeland. This act of religious tolerance and magnanimity further solidified Cyrus's reputation as a wise and just ruler. The conquest of Babylon also marked the beginning of the Persian Empire's dominance over the ancient Near East. By the time of his death in 530 BCE, Cyrus had established an empire that spanned from the Mediterranean Sea in the west to the Indus River in the east. It was the largest empire the world had ever seen, and it set the stage for future Persian rulers to expand even further. The expansion and administration of the Persian Empire. After the death of Cyrus the Great in 530 BCE, the Persian Empire was left under the control of his son, Cambyses II. While Cyrus's reign had laid the foundations of an empire that spanned vast territories, it was Cambyses who would continue his father's legacy by further expanding the empire's borders and solidifying Persian dominance over the ancient world. Yet, Cambyses's reign would also reveal the complexities and challenges of managing such a vast and diverse empire. The conquest of Egypt. One of the most significant achievements of Cambyses was his successful campaign against Egypt, which had long been a powerful civilization in the ancient world. The Egyptians had resisted foreign domination for centuries, and their pharaohs had successfully repelled several invasions. However, Cambyses's military prowess and strategic acumen would lead to a pivotal moment in history, the conquest of Egypt. In 525 BCE, Cambyses marched his army into Egypt, defeating the forces of Pharaoh Psamtik III at the Battle of Pelusium. With this victory, Cambyses effectively brought Egypt under Persian control. The conquest of Egypt was not just a military triumph, but also a cultural and political shift, as the Persians imposed their rule over one of the world's oldest and most storied civilizations. Cambyses took the title of pharaoh and integrated Egypt into the Persian Empire, making it a key province. However, his rule over Egypt was marred by cruelty and controversy. Cambyses's decision to kill the sacred bull, the Apis, and his alleged desecration of Egyptian temples alienated the local population. Though he had succeeded in expanding the empire, Cambyses's reign left a legacy of resentment among the Egyptians. Cambyses's rule was also short-lived. In 522 BCE, he died under mysterious circumstances during an expedition in the eastern parts of the empire. His death set off a brief period of turmoil in Persia, as the empire struggled to maintain its unity and stability. The rise of Darius the Great. Following Cambyses's death, a power struggle ensued among the Persian elite. Several claimants to the throne emerged, but it was Darius I, known as Darius the Great, who would ultimately emerge victorious. Darius's ascent to the throne marked a new chapter in the history of the Persian Empire, one characterized by both military brilliance and administrative innovation. Darius's rise to power was not straightforward. He was not a direct descendant of Cyrus the Great, but rather a distant relative, and his claim to the throne was challenged by other contenders. However, Darius proved himself to be a capable and determined leader. In 522 BCE, after a series of strategic maneuvers and military victories, Darius secured the throne and established himself as the king of Persia. Darius's reign would come to define the Persian Empire at its height. One of his first tasks was to consolidate his power and restore stability after the turmoil that followed Cambyses' death. Darius quickly eliminated rivals and suppressed rebellions, ensuring that the empire remained unified. He also took steps to strengthen the Persian state by instituting a series of crucial reforms that would have a lasting impact on the empire's administration. Darius's administrative reforms. One of Darius's most significant contributions was his reform of the empire's administrative structure. The Persian Empire was vast, and managing such a large territory required a sophisticated system of governance. To address this challenge, Darius divided the empire into several provinces, known as satrapies, each governed by a satrap or provincial governor. The satraps were responsible for maintaining order, collecting taxes, and ensuring the loyalty of their regions to the king. To ensure the effectiveness of this system, Darius implemented a system of royal inspectors, known as the eyes and ears of the king, who were sent to monitor the satraps and prevent corruption or rebellion. This hierarchical system of governance allowed Darius to maintain control over the far-flung reaches of his empire, from the eastern lands of India to the western shores of the Aegean Sea. Additionally, Darius standardized the currency of the empire, issuing the gold coin known as the Darichos as a means of facilitating trade and commerce. This monetary reform helped stimulate economic growth and trade across the empire, making the Persian Empire one of the most prosperous and interconnected civilizations of its time. Darius also took steps to improve infrastructure. He commissioned the construction of roads, bridges, and canals to improve communication and transportation throughout the empire. The Royal Road, a network of highways stretching from Susa in Persia to Sardis in Anatolia, became a critical artery for the movement of goods, soldiers, and messages. This infrastructure would play a crucial role in the expansion of the empire and its ability to maintain control over such a vast territory. The Greco-Persian Wars begin. While Darius was focused on consolidating his power and strengthening the empire internally, external challenges loomed large. In the West, the Greek city-states were emerging as a growing power, and their influence would soon come into direct conflict with the Persian Empire. The Greeks were organized into independent city-states, and their growing prosperity and military prowess would soon become a thorn in the side of the Persians. The first major confrontation between Persia and the Greek city-states occurred in 490 BCE, when Darius launched a military campaign to subjugate the Greek mainland. The Greeks, however, proved to be formidable adversaries. In the famous Battle of Marathon, the Persian forces were decisively defeated by a much smaller Greek army, marking one of the first significant setbacks for the Persian Empire in its expansion efforts. The defeat at Marathon was a significant blow to Darius's ambitions in Greece, but it did not end his desire for conquest. He began preparing for a second invasion, but before he could launch it, Darius died in 486 BCE, leaving the task of avenging the Persian defeat to his son, Xerxes I. The reign of Xerxes and the Greco-Persian Wars. With the death of Darius I in 486 BCE, the Persian Empire passed into the hands of his son Xerxes I. Xerxes' ascension marked a turning point in the history of the Persian Empire, as he sought to continue his father's ambitions while navigating the challenges posed by internal dissent, the complexity of governing a vast and diverse empire, and the rising threat from Greece. His reign would come to be defined by the dramatic continuation of the Greco-Persian Wars, a series of conflicts that would shape the future of both the Persian Empire and the Greek city-states. Xerxes and his preparation for war. Xerxes' rise to the throne was not smooth. While he had a clear claim to the throne as the eldest son of Darius, his rule was challenged by several revolts within the empire. One of the most notable rebellions took place in Egypt, where the Egyptian people had long resented Persian rule. In 484 BCE, shortly after Xerxes took power, the Egyptians rose up against Persian control. Xerxes quickly responded by sending an army to quell the revolt. The rebellion was brutally suppressed, and Egypt was brought back under Persian control. But the episode highlighted the difficulty of maintaining authority over such a vast empire. Despite these internal challenges, Xerxes was determined to complete his father's unfinished business, namely, to conquer Greece and exact revenge for the Persian defeat at the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE. He launched an immense military campaign against the Greeks, gathering an army that, according to ancient sources, may have numbered as many as several 100,000 soldiers. supported by a vast fleet of ships. The Persian forces were poised to crush the Greeks once and for all, but the outcome of this campaign would become one of the most famous conflicts in ancient history: the Battle of Thermopylae and the fall of the Persian Empire's hopes. In 480 BCE, Xerxes led his massive army into Greece, determined to break the Greek city-state's resistance. The Persian advance was met with determined opposition, with the Greeks forming a fragile but unified defense against the Persian juggernaut. The first major confrontation between the two sides occurred at the narrow pass of Thermopylae, where a small force of Greek soldiers, led by King Leonidas of Sparta, made a heroic stand against the Persian army. The Persian army vastly outnumbered the Greeks, but the Greeks held their ground in the narrow pass, using the terrain to their advantage and inflicting significant casualties on the Persians. However, the Greeks were ultimately betrayed by a local who revealed a secret mountain path to the Persians, allowing Xerxes to flank the Greek position. Despite their valiant defense, the Greek force was overwhelmed, and King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans famously perished fighting to the last man. While the Battle of Thermopylae ended in defeat for the Greeks, it became a symbol of heroic resistance and sacrifice that would inspire generations to come. Despite the loss at Thermopylae, the Greeks were far from defeated. The naval battle that would follow, the Battle of Salamis, would turn the tide in favor of the Greek city-states. The Battle of Salamis, a turning point. While Xerxes continued his march through Greece, the Greek city-states, led by Athens, formed a coalition to resist the Persian invasion. The Greek fleet, though smaller, was far more agile and strategically astute than the Persian fleet. The Greeks decided to confront the Persians in the waters around the island of Salamis, a narrow strait where the Persian fleet's size and numbers would work against them. In 480 BCE, the two fleets clashed in the Battle of Salamis, one of the most decisive naval battles in history. The Greek fleet, under the leadership of Themistocles, used clever tactics to lure the Persian ships into the narrow strait, where the larger Persian vessels were unable to maneuver effectively. The Greek triremes, faster and more maneuverable, decisively defeated the Persian fleet. With this loss, Xerxes' plans for a complete conquest of Greece were thrown into disarray. The victory at Salamis was a turning point in the Greco-Persian Wars. The Persian fleet, which had been the backbone of Xerxes' invasion, was shattered, and the Greeks gained a crucial advantage. Although Xerxes remained in Greece with a significant land force, the loss at Salamis severely weakened his position. The Battle of Plataea and the end of Persian ambitions in Greece. Following the naval defeat, Xerxes retreated, leaving behind a portion of his army to continue the campaign. In 479 BCE, the Greeks gathered a united force to confront the remaining Persian troops at the Battle of Plataea. The Persian forces, now under the command of Mardonius, fought against a coalition of Greek city-states led by Sparta and Athens. The Battle of Plataea marked the final significant engagement of the Greco-Persian Wars. The Greek forces, particularly the Spartans, decisively defeated the Persians, killing Mardonius and scattering the remaining Persian troops. With the defeat at Plataea, the Persian Empire's ambitions in Greece came to an end. The Persian fleet, still battered from Salamis, was also decisively defeated in the Battle of Mycale, further cementing Greece's victory. The defeat of the Persian forces at Plataea and Mycale marked the end of Xerxes' campaign in Greece, and it was a massive blow to the Persian Empire. The Greek city-states, united by a common cause, had successfully repelled one of the most powerful empires in the world. In the wake of these defeats, Persia was forced to withdraw from Greece, and the dream of Persian domination over the Greek world was shattered. Aftermath and the long-term impact on the Persian Empire. Though Xerxes returned to Persia after his defeat in Greece, the loss at the hands of the Greeks had far-reaching consequences. The Persian Empire had suffered significant military and moral setbacks. While the empire would continue to thrive for several more decades, the war with Greece marked the beginning of a slow decline in Persian influence over the Mediterranean. Internally, Xerxes' reign was also marked by political unrest and rebellion in various parts of the empire. The Egyptian revolt, which had been a thorn in the side of the Persians for decades, would flare up again after the defeat in Greece, and other regions of the empire began to question Persian authority. Despite these challenges, the Persian Empire remained a formidable power, but it would no longer be the unstoppable force it had once been. Part 4. The Decline and Internal Struggles of the Persian Empire. The defeats suffered by Xerxes during the Greco-Persian Wars marked a turning point in the history of the Persian Empire. Though Persia had maintained its territorial integrity, the empire's military prowess and confidence were deeply shaken. The failure to conquer Greece had far-reaching implications not only for the empire's foreign policy but also for its internal stability. While the Persian Empire would endure for several more decades, its glory days were behind it. In the wake of Xerxes' reign, the Persian Empire would begin to experience internal strife, royal instability, and eventual decline. Xerxes' successors and the challenges of governance. After Xerxes' death in 465 BCE, his son Artaxerxes I ascended to the throne. Artaxerxes' reign began with significant challenges. Though he was able to stabilize the empire after his father's tumultuous reign, the empire's unity was continually threatened by rebellions and revolts in various provinces. Egypt, in particular, proved to be a continual thorn in the side of the Persian kings. In 460 BCE, Egypt revolted once again, leading to the restoration of Egyptian independence for a brief period. This rebellion was a significant setback for the Persians as Egypt was a valuable province with both strategic and economic importance. Artaxerxes sent a military expedition to recapture Egypt, which was initially successful. However, the constant rebellions in Egypt, along with uprisings in other regions of the empire, exposed the growing difficulty of controlling such a vast and diverse empire. One of the most significant challenges Artaxerxes faced during his reign was the power struggle among the Persian elite. The court was rife with intrigue and rival factions within the royal family, and the nobility often vied for influence. While Artaxerxes managed to survive these challenges, the political instability at the heart of the empire was a precursor to the difficulties his successors would face. The Persian Empire and the rise of the Greek influence. Despite its internal struggles, the Persian Empire continued to be a significant force in the ancient world. However, the Greek city-states, having repelled the Persian invasion, began to grow in power and influence. The Delian League, an alliance of Greek city-states led by Athens, began to challenge Persian dominance in the Aegean Sea. Athens, emboldened by its victory in the Greco-Persian Wars, grew stronger politically and economically, while Persian power in the region gradually weakened. The Peloponnesian War, 431 to 404 BCE, between Athens and Sparta further complicated the situation for the Persians. Initially, the Persians saw the conflict as an opportunity to weaken both Athens and Sparta as they supported one side or the other in the war. Persia provided financial support to the Spartans, helping them build a navy that would eventually defeat Athens. After Athens' defeat, Persia regained control of several key Greek cities, but this only further complicated relations with the Greek world. Even as Persian influence in the Aegean and beyond began to wane, the empire's core regions, such as Mesopotamia, Persia, and Anatolia, remained firmly under Persian rule. The vast empire still had enormous resources at its disposal, but the threat from the Greek city-states and the increasing challenges of governance began to take their toll. The reign of Darius II and the continued struggles. Darius II, who reigned from 423 to 404 BCE, would be the last of the Achaemenid kings to hold the empire together in anything resembling its former glory. His reign was marked by political infighting and widespread corruption within the royal court. Though Darius was able to hold off several challenges from rival factions, his inability to fully assert control over the empire's provinces allowed rebellions to persist. Internally, the empire's administration had become more fragmented, with satraps, provincial governors, increasingly acting with autonomy, sometimes disregarding the authority of the central government. Some satraps even began to engage in their own wars and power struggles, undermining the coherence and unity of the empire. Externally, the Persian Empire's ability to maintain influence in the Mediterranean region began to erode. The Greek city-states, particularly Athens and Sparta, continued to flex their military and economic muscles, and Persian attempts to regain dominance in the region were increasingly unsuccessful. The Persians' involvement in the Peloponnesian War had drained resources and left them vulnerable to further Greek incursions. The decline of Persia's power. The death of Darius II in 404 BCE marked the beginning of a gradual decline in the power of the Achaemenid dynasty. His successor, Artaxerxes II, inherited an empire already struggling with internal divisions, revolts, and external pressures. While Artaxerxes II managed to maintain the empire for a time, he was unable to prevent further fragmentation and deterioration in central control. By the mid-4th century BCE, Persia faced multiple threats from within and without. Rebellions in Egypt, which had previously been a recurring issue, flared up again during the reign of Artaxerxes II and continued under his son, Artaxerxes III. The satraps of Asia Minor also sought more autonomy, which led to power struggles that weakened the central authority of the Persian throne. On the external front, the Persian Empire faced increasing challenges from the rising power of Macedonia under Philip II and his son, Alexander the Great. The Macedonian military machine, with its highly trained army and innovative tactics, would eventually spell the end of the Achaemenid dynasty. The final confrontation, the rise of Alexander the Great. By the time of Artaxerxes III's reign in the late 4th century BCE, the Persian Empire was already in decline. The once great empire was now faced with a new threat, Alexander the Great, who had begun his conquest of the known world. In 334 BCE, Alexander crossed into Asia Minor, determined to challenge the Persian Empire and fulfill his ambition of uniting the Greek world and defeating the long-standing Persian threat. The Persian Empire, despite its vast size, was increasingly unable to mount a successful defense against Alexander's rapid advance. The Macedonian army, known for its disciplined formations and exceptional cavalry, won a series of crushing victories against the Persians. The Battle of Granicus, 334 BCE, the Battle of Issus, 333 BCE, and, most decisively, the Battle of Gaugamela, 331 BCE, would seal the fate of the Persian Empire, the fall of the Persian Empire and the legacy of the Achaemenids. As the Persian Empire faced internal turmoil and external pressures in the 4th century BCE, the once mighty Achaemenid dynasty began to falter. Although the empire had controlled vast swathes of territory for centuries, from the Aegean to India, it was now confronted by a rising power from the west. That power was none other than Alexander the Great, whose conquests would ultimately bring an end to the Persian Empire and shift the balance of power in the ancient world forever. The demise of the Achaemenids would mark the end of an era, but their legacy would influence the regions they once ruled for centuries to come. The rise of Alexander the Great. Born in 356 BCE, Alexander III of Macedon, later known as Alexander the Great, was the son of King Philip II of Macedon. Under the guidance of his father, who unified Greece and created a powerful military force, Alexander was groomed for leadership from an early age. When Philip II was assassinated in 336 BCE, Alexander ascended to the throne at just 20 years old. He inherited not only a unified and powerful Greece but also an ambition to extend Macedonian influence across the known world. Alexander's primary goal was to exact revenge on Persia for the invasions that had threatened Greece decades earlier. His mission, however, was not just one of vengeance. It was a grand, strategic conquest aimed at unifying the Greek city-states, securing Macedonia's power, and establishing his own legacy as a ruler of an empire that would stretch from Greece to India. With the support of his father's military apparatus, Alexander set out to fulfill his vision. In 334 BCE, he led his army across the Hellespont into Asia Minor, beginning his campaign against the Persian Empire. The Battle of Granicus, 334 BCE. The first major engagement between Alexander and the Persian forces took place at the Battle of Granicus near the Hellespont in 334 BCE. The Persian satraps, local governors of the western provinces, gathered a large army to confront the Macedonian invasion. Although the Persian army outnumbered the Macedonian forces, they were unable to withstand Alexander's tactical brilliance. The Macedonian army, with its highly disciplined phalanx formation and elite cavalry, decisively defeated the Persians. The Battle of Granicus opened the path for Alexander's continued advance into Asia Minor. After this victory, he captured several key cities, including Sardis and Ephesus, securing his foothold in Anatolia. The rapid success of the Macedonian army sent shockwaves throughout the Persian Empire and marked the beginning of Alexander's relentless campaign against the Achaemenid dynasty. The Battle of Issus, 333 BCE. After his victories in Asia Minor, Alexander continued southward, pushing deeper into Persian territory. In 333 BCE, the Persian king Darius III, who had ascended the throne in 336 BCE, assembled a massive army to confront Alexander. The Battle of Issus, fought near the modern-day Turkish-Syrian border, became one of the defining moments of Alexander's campaign. Darius's forces were vast, but Alexander's tactical ingenuity once again proved to be the deciding factor. The Macedonian army was able to exploit the terrain and outmaneuver the Persians, forcing Darius to retreat. The battle ended in a decisive victory for Alexander, with Darius fleeing the battlefield, leaving behind his family and a vast amount of treasure. The victory at Issus was a major blow to the Persians and marked the beginning of Alexander's domination of the eastern Mediterranean. Following his triumph, Alexander captured key cities in Syria and Palestine, including the strategically important city of Tyre, which had defied his forces. His victory in the region ultimately led to his control over the Levant and Egypt. The Siege of Tyre and the founding of Alexandria, 332 BCE. In 332 BCE, Alexander laid siege to the city of Tyre, a formidable Phoenician city located on an island off the coast of modern Lebanon. Tyre was heavily fortified and considered one of the greatest naval powers of the time, making it a crucial stronghold in the eastern Mediterranean. The city's refusal to surrender to Alexander became a matter of pride for the Macedonian king, who relentlessly pursued its capture. After a 7-month siege, Alexander's forces managed to breach the city's defenses by constructing a causeway to reach the island. The fall of Tyre marked the end of Phoenician naval power in the region and allowed Alexander to secure dominance over the eastern Mediterranean coast. Following this victory, Alexander marched southward into Egypt, where he was hailed as a liberator by the Egyptians. In Egypt, Alexander founded the city of Alexandria, which would go on to become one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. Alexandria would become a hub of culture, commerce, and learning, and it would remain a key center of knowledge throughout the Hellenistic period. The Battle of Gaugamela, 331 BCE. The final confrontation between Alexander and the Persian Empire took place in 331 BCE at the Battle of Gaugamela, near modern-day Iraq. Darius III had raised another enormous army to defend the heart of his empire, but this time Alexander's forces would not be denied. Despite being vastly outnumbered, Alexander's tactical brilliance and the discipline of his troops once again turned the tide of battle in his favor. At Gaugamela, Alexander deployed his forces in a way that maximized their effectiveness, exploiting gaps in the Persian line and using his cavalry to strike decisively. The Persian army, despite its size and the presence of war elephants, was routed. Darius III fled the battlefield once again, this time never to return. The Battle of Gaugamela marked the final collapse of the Achaemenid dynasty, the fall of Persepolis, and the end of the Persian Empire. After his victory at Gaugamela, Alexander pursued Darius across the Persian Empire. Darius was eventually betrayed and murdered by his own men in 330 BCE. With Darius's death, the Achaemenid Empire effectively came to an end. Alexander, now the master of Persia, moved on to capture the Persian capital of Persepolis in 330 BCE. The city, which had once stood as a symbol of the wealth and power of the Persian kings, was looted and burned by Alexander's forces. The fall of Persepolis was both symbolic and practical, as it represented the destruction of the Persian Empire's heart. The loss of such an iconic city, along with the death of Darius III, marked the official end of the Achaemenid dynasty and the Persian Empire. The legacy of the Persian Empire. Though the Persian Empire was no more, its legacy endured in the territories Alexander conquered. The Achaemenids had established a vast, multi-ethnic empire that contributed to the development of a shared cultural and administrative framework across much of the ancient world. Their achievements in governance, infrastructure, and commerce influenced the development of future empires, including Alexander's own Hellenistic kingdoms. Additionally, Persian culture left an indelible mark on the regions that came under Greek control. The blending of Greek and Persian cultures in the wake of Alexander's conquests, known as Hellenistic culture, would have far-reaching effects on art, science, philosophy, and politics throughout the ancient world. The legacy of the Persian Empire and its influence on the ancient world. With the death of Darius III in 330 BCE and the fall of Persepolis, the Achaemenid Persian Empire was effectively brought to an end. Alexander the Great's conquest of Persia marked the conclusion of centuries of Persian dominance in the ancient world. However, the legacy of the Persian Empire did not end with its downfall. The impact of the Achaemenid dynasty on the civilizations that succeeded it, particularly the Hellenistic kingdoms that arose after Alexander's death, was profound and lasting. The Hellenistic Empire and the fusion of cultures. After the death of Alexander in 323 BCE, his empire was divided among his generals, known as the Diadochi, who fought for control of the vast territories he had conquered. The Persian lands fell under the control of Seleucus I Nicator, who founded the Seleucid Empire. The Seleucids, like Alexander, inherited the Persian administrative structure and much of the Persian cultural influence, and they sought to blend Greek and Persian traditions into a new, hybrid Hellenistic culture. Under Seleucid rule, cities such as Antioch and Seleucia grew into major centers of trade, culture, and learning. The Persian influence on these cities was still evident as Greek and Persian art, architecture, and political systems fused. The Achaemenid style of governance, with its system of satraps, governors, managing local regions, was incorporated into the new empire alongside Greek military tactics and strategies. This fusion of Greek and Persian traditions would go on to shape the Hellenistic world and influence future empires. The influence on successor states. Beyond the Seleucid Empire, the legacy of the Persian Empire continued to reverberate in the successor states that emerged in the wake of Alexander's death. The Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, established by one of Alexander's generals, Ptolemy, inherited elements of Persian governance. The Ptolemies, like the Seleucids, maintained a sophisticated bureaucracy, utilizing Persian-inspired administrative techniques to govern their vast empire. In India, Alexander's conquests had exposed the Persian Empire's cultural and administrative practices to the subcontinent, leaving a lasting impact on Indian governance and art. Persian elements in the architecture of the Maurya Empire, as well as in the coins and inscriptions of Indian rulers, indicate a significant exchange of ideas between the two cultures. Moreover, even the Roman Empire, which would rise to prominence in the centuries following Alexander's death, was influenced by the Persian model of governance. Roman emperors often modeled their courts after the Achaemenid royal court, adopting Persian-style ceremonial practices and regalia. The concept of an emperor as a divine ruler, derived from Persian kingship, also had a lasting impact on Roman imperial ideology. Cultural and intellectual legacy. Beyond politics and governance, the cultural legacy of the Persian Empire was also significant. Persian literature, art, and architecture continued to influence the cultures that succeeded the empire. One of the most enduring contributions of the Persians was their system of road building and infrastructure, epitomized by the Royal Road, which stretched from Susa in Persia to Sardis in Asia Minor. This network of roads facilitated communication, trade, and the movement of armies, not only during the Achaemenid period but also long after the empire's fall. In terms of intellectual achievements, the Persian Empire fostered a rich tradition of science, mathematics, and astronomy. The Persian scholars in the ancient world played a key role in preserving and transmitting knowledge from Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece, particularly in the fields of mathematics and astronomy. The Persian contribution to the development of the zodiac, which would later be incorporated into Greek and Roman systems, is just one example of how Persian scholarship impacted subsequent civilizations. Additionally, Zoroastrianism, the dominant religion of the Achaemenid Empire, continued to influence religious thought for centuries. Zoroastrian ideas about dualism, the nature of good and evil, and the concept of a final judgment were incorporated into the religious philosophies of both the Greek and Roman worlds. The influence of Zoroastrianism can also be seen in later monotheistic religions, such as Christianity and Islam, both of which absorbed aspects of Zoroastrian teachings over time. The end of Persian rule and the rise of the Sassanids. After the fall of the Achaemenid Empire, Persia would not remain under foreign rule for long. The Seleucid Empire eventually weakened, and by the mid-3rd century BCE, a new Persian dynasty, the Parthians, rose to power in Iran. The Parthian Empire, which lasted from 247 BCE to 224 CE, successfully resisted Roman expansion and revived many elements of the Persian political and military systems. The Parthians upheld the ideals of Persian kingship, and their empire served as a bridge between the ancient Persian world and the emerging Islamic empires. The Parthians were eventually supplanted by the Sassanid dynasty, which came to power in 224 CE. The Sassanid Empire was a direct continuation of the Achaemenid legacy, seeking to restore Persian imperial power to its former glory. Under the Sassanids, Persia became one of the most powerful empires in the world, rivaling the Byzantine Empire to the west and engaging in both military and cultural exchanges with India, China, and the Greco-Roman world. The Sassanid Empire would continue the Persian tradition of centralized rule, promoting Zoroastrianism as the state religion and strengthening the Persian cultural identity.